Alright, I've got my truck apart. I wanted to go over some of the pros and cons of this cheaper RC and show you some of the things I've noticed as an owner. I would have to say the best part about this truck is that I only paid $70 for it. It is not hobby grade and I'm not a hobbyist. I'm just trying to have a good time with an RC truck for a decent price. Start with the front end. It does have metal drive shafts and it has a metal center shaft that comes up the center of the vehicle, which drives the front differential. However, the front differential is plastic. These shocks are not oil filled, they're air filled, and they are very springy. I have them loaded down because the front keeps sagging with the suspension setup. You'll notice I have the helmet on the tire. That's because I removed it because it did not look scaled to the vehicle, I thought, and I just didn't like it in there. It is set up very similar to most hobby grade vehicles. It is a clone of a Viterra twin hammers. You can switch over some of the parts, but most of them will not fit because of different scale. Let's go over the middle of the vehicle. It has a very strong, I would say overpowered 540 turn motor, or 540 motor, sorry, not turn, 540 motor. It's brushed. It is overpowered for this. It does have a metal pinion that connects to a plastic spur gear, so you got to be careful with it, I would imagine, but it has been pretty strong so far. As you can see, I have my ESC sitting here. It is the ESC and receiver combo in one. I removed it and sealed it better so it's completely waterproof, and I put Velcro on the bottom so it could be easily removed if I wanted to put it on or off. Right now I have it all apart, so I could take the cover off and inspect the bearings in here, and I'm going to put some grease on them. I kind of like the fact that there's no slipper, clutch, or anything like that in the way. It would just be another braking point. However, it takes a lot of force directly to the main gear, which drives the shafts directly, which can be a braking point on bind-ups. You can see my ESC looks a little bit worse for the wear, but that's just because it's covered in a cheap glue. I sealed it and covered up the hole on the top for the light because it had a little bit of hole that would let water inside of it if it was submerged. However, I do not plan on submerging my vehicle. I just wanted to make sure that I wouldn't have any issues with it. The servo in here is pretty weak. I would say it's a plastic gear servo from what I've seen. It does have a small bit of a servo saver on there. I believe that's what it is. It tries to keep it from stripping the gears. But the movement of the front end is a little bit sluggish and stiff, and it could be a little bit stronger, but can't complain too much for the price point. If I had to say anything about the middle of the vehicle, is you can notice that it is completely upgradable. It has a weight down here to counterbalance for the weight of the motor being on this side, so it doesn't twist in the air or land crooked. Or also, when it takes off, it does a torque twist, which lifts up the left front wheel, and that kind of counteracts that at least a little bit. But the best part about the center of this vehicle, as you can notice, it is completely available to be able to upgrade it to whatever you want. And I have some of my upgrades that I've purchased here. I have my FlySky receiver, my FlySky remote, and a Ghoul RC computer, or ESC, which I have hooked up and used it on here. It has an engine brake and everything. So you can completely switch everything over and have different setup underneath the hood. If anything, this vehicle is good for is a good platform to build whatever you wanted. Moving to the rear of the vehicle is the most common issue for this truck. I've seen all over the internet is the rear axle is plastic, the differential inside, and in multiple different points it strips out or breaks or lets loose. I've in another video completely taken apart, dismantled, and rebuilt it after cleaning everything. I rebuilt it with JB Weld and completely filled the diff with JB Weld. The axle was broken and it's completely fixed now, and it's a solid axle, which performs much better than the original. I had an issue also with the rear drive shaft. I don't know if you can see that there is a set screw missing on the rear end. You need to make sure you go through and tighten up all your set screws all the way through every once in a while to make sure everything is nice and tight. I would say the suspension on the back end is good for what it needs. The only thing is it has a lot of spring there, so it is a very springy vehicle, and it tends to bounce up and down instead of absorb the bumps, which is not the greatest. And this, when it is on hard surfaces like pavement or concrete, it tends to traction roll very easily because the body rolls. It doesn't absorb any bumps, and it does not handle very well because of the suspension. It is raised up a decent height, but I try to put a little bit more tension on it just to make sure that it stays up high because it is a low riding buggy. This is the battery tray, and it's pretty small. I have an upgraded battery that I can't fit in there, but the battery that I bought is way too big. I've seen people put 2200s in there pretty easily, but I plan on doing some modifications down the road and putting a much larger battery in there for longer run times. However, you're going to be careful because it will create a lot of heat. If you're looking to upgrade your Wltoys, you can look at the 5U 112 scale, which is the exact same, and a lot of the parts are metal and they're a lot stronger and they fit right in here. It is also a 112 scale, and I have a servo on the way for the front end, which is a stronger servo, and it's a 3-wire, which was compatible with all upgrades. That way you can put in whatever you want. The ESC doesn't much matter as long as it matches the motor, but the servo, look up for a 5U 112th, and you can get a perfectly fitting 3-wire servo to fit this vehicle. Another issue that I had is, if you notice the bead locks, they look nice. One of them exploded on me when I come down on a jump. You'll notice that the left front tire is a little bit cleaner than the rest. That's because my original tire is here, and if you look inside of there, you'll see that the bead lock completely exploded on impact and it turned into shrapnel. So the bead locks are not very strong, especially if jumping it. Alright, I partially reassembled it. I put the cover back on the spur gear in the pinion. There's 3 screws that hold the steering on and also hold the front of the bracket for the suspension mount. And those 2 bolts on the back, those 2 screws behind the Velcro, also hold the cover for the spur gear on. I do plan on doing some more upgrades, like the tires. I think they're a little bit narrow and could be a little bit taller, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to upgrade the shocks, and I do plan on getting the metal spur gear, which is on Amazon for about $15. It's a 62 tooth if you want to pick one up. I'm just going to put my ESC back on here and plug it back in. It says waterproof on the box, but I would not get that motor dirty with dirty muddy water. Clean water is okay. It should be alright, but I've seen people have problems with their servos and everything. But now that I have all my upgrades, I might just test it out. And if everything goes bad, I'll just put my upgrades in there. The last and final issue that I had was the remote control. The steering on this controller went bad. As you can see, it doesn't return. There's no spring. This one I did just receive for free, and when I took it apart to try to fix that one, the spring for the throttle control broke off, and then the entire throttle just crumbled. So it's a bit of a cheap remote, so that's why I am glad that I still have my backups if everything needs to go back together. And that's my bearing grease that I've been sticking on there. You gotta be careful about putting heavy grease in there because it can make dirt and grime stick, but I'm constantly cleaning it and re-greasing it and everything and trying to keep all the junk out of it. I tied my lights up because I don't really use them too much, and I think it's just a drain on the battery. And I did that little cutout right there so I could fit my bigger ESC in there. And in case you're wondering, it's 8 screws to peel that body back. These 2, 4 on the bottom. These 2 across the back, and there's one right there underneath the 3. Alright, she's all back together in stock form, and I just want to show you that it was a little bit wet and do a little takeoff. You see it lifted that front wheel up. I think it looks much better without that guy in there.